So, you want to learn how to grow your intuition. Maybe you are someone who is interested in growing your intuition to interpret your own tarot cards. Maybe you are someone else who just wants to grow your intuition just to help you throughout your life. In today's video, I'm going to be having a chat with you guys about how to grow your intuition, different things that are really important to keep in mind along your journey, and then just giving some advice and some exercises that you can do in order to grow your own intuition. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about what intuition is. My interpretation of what intuition is a deep sense of knowing. And a lot of times, this sense of knowing comes from somewhere that we don't always know. It sometimes comes from sources outside of ourselves, and also sometimes from sources inside of ourselves. I think a lot of times people, when they think of intuition, they think of it as messages from like the spirit realm in a way, past loved ones, spirit guides, things like that. And well, yes, I do believe personally for me that there are times that I have received messages from kind of more behind the veil in a way. I think honestly, in most of our life, a lot of what intuition is really good pattern recognition in a way. But I feel like a lot of this recognition that's happening, or even a lot of these messages, they're happening on such a subliminal level in our mind. Almost like our brainstem, or what is like thought of as our hindbrain, is kind of the facilitator of this, right? So I feel like that part of your mind is able to sometimes recognize things because that part of your brain is part of fight or flight. It's part of this more primal place where really like you have to be able to use your instincts in order to survive. And so I think that, this comes from a deeper place in our brain where maybe it's recognizing threats or patterns in a way that is happening before our conscious or thinking brain is really able to recognize it as well. But sometimes it really does kind of have a feel about it, and we'll get into this a little bit more feeling later in the video because this is really important. But I feel like there is a difference between the way that messages manifest from the body versus how messages manifest from the ethereal realm in a way. And so, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I really think that, you can have both, you can work with both. And part of that is going to be personal belief for yourself, but also I just think that, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I don't think we have to put intuition in a cage. Now, I will say intuitive messages oftentimes do manifest through our physical bodies, our physical sensations. So you may be familiar with terms like claircognizance, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, right? And these are the 6 clairs. Prefix at the front there, clair, means clear. So when we're saying clairaudience, at the very beginning we have clair, which is clear, and audience is hearing. So really what we're saying is clear hearing. Almost like hearing clear messages from spirit, source, whatever it is, your guides. We have the 6 clairs, and the first one is claircognizance, which is clear knowing. Then we have clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. Clairaudience, which we kind of already talked about, is clear hearing. Then we have clairsentience, which is clear feeling. Clairgustance, which is clear tasting. And then clairalience, which is clear smelling. There we go. Clairalience is smell. So we have the 6 clairs that, manifest that way. So 5 senses plus our mind in a way. When we're talking about this, a lot of times this stuff manifests, like we said, through your senses, because that is one of the ways that we receive messages in our body from our brains, right? There's different ways it manifests, but our physical senses is often what these manifests through. And so that is where we get to the first part of this video, which is really talking about learning to get in touch with your body, because that is really what is going to be one of the most foundational things for learning how to build your intuition, because these things are manifesting through the physical body. And so if you are disconnected from your body, you I won't say that you can miss messages, because I do feel like spirit has this sense of intelligence about it, where I feel like if you're unable to be communicated to in a certain way, spirit is going to try a different way to communicate that to you, right? I don't feel like if there's a message that you will miss it. But I think that a lot of times we kind of don't always hear it the first time. Or a lot of times what happens is we second guess ourselves and we receive a message and we kind of think, no, maybe I'm just looking too much into it, or maybe I'm thinking too hard about it, only to be proven right a little bit later. And so, that's kind of where it's like this pattern recognition, but I feel like there's a feeling, a difference in the way that these messages feel when they're communicated. That is a very, very subtle shift between messages that are coming from our bodies versus messages that are coming from source, or like God, intelligence, things like that. So you do need to be able to be in touch with your body in order to feel these messages, to hear them and see them. So what are ways that we can get in touch with our bodies? Well, a lot of times physical movement, things like yoga, things like weightlifting, running, walking, anything that requires you to be very mindful about your movement and what you are doing. Do something that is going to cause you to focus on each individual area of your body. This is why yoga tends to be so transcendental and so wonderful for a lot of people to grow their intuition, because it causes you to focus and really get into your body about how you are doing certain poses. Are you moving too far into a pose and starting to feel strained, or do you need to back out of a pose? These are all really subtle things that don't always happen on a level that is like fully consciously aware, right? And so when you are listening to your body in these poses, you are really actually following your intuition in a way. You're following your intuition about what is best for your body and how your body fits into certain places. So that's why yoga is really good. That's why weightlifting is really good, because that causes you to focus on lifting the weight with proper posture and making sure that you're breathing properly while you're doing these things too. So you're really getting into like the itty bitty teeny tiny little spaces of our bodies that we kind of forget about sometimes, and really focusing on like what it actually feels like in your body. Running is really good because you have to be aware. You're usually, as you get further into running, right, you end up having to be more aware of when you're breathing and on which step and things like that, and being aware of your surroundings still in a way. You can't close your eyes and nap while you're running. So you do have to be conscious. You have to be in your body. And so that's how come a lot of these things can actually help your intuition grow, because the more that you listen to your body, the more that you listen to those little signals that you get when you do something like physical movement, you're able to listen to your intuition. And that builds trust with your body. That builds trust with yourself. And that comes to the other part that I want to talk about here too, is building self-trust. Because like we said earlier, a lot of times, maybe you're talking to a person that you don't feel like is a good person you want to be friends with, that everybody else really likes. And you don't follow your intuition, and that person ends up being a very bad person that you shouldn't have been friends with. You have to learn to trust yourself to interpret these messages. Because if you doubt yourself, if you don't act on these messages, what good are they really doing for you? I think a lot of people end up being more scared of acting on their intuition sometimes than not acting on it. A lot of times because I think it requires us to do something that may be outside of our comfort zone. So it can be pretty daunting when you receive a message from a guide that it's time to maybe leave a job that is no longer serving you, or to go and change a relationship that you're currently in because this person is not for you anymore. I mean, these are kind of on the more extreme ends of listening to your intuition. I think a lot of times people are more scared of what happens when they do act or when they don't act, that they end up just kind of stuck in this place of like, well, I'm not going to do anything. And so we end up missing out. We actually do sometimes miss out on things because we receive these messages and we don't do something, or we receive these messages and we doubt ourselves about the truth or validity of it. And it ends up, we end up being right in the first place. So one of the ways to build trust with yourself, and we kind of already talked about this, but it's physical movement. That's honestly, a lot more people need to look at physical movement as like a form of therapy for oneself. And physical movement does such a good job with learning to build self-trust if you are following it with a good mindset. Building self-trust through movement comes from a place of listening to your body. So on days that you feel really sick and don't want to go for a run, don't go for a run. Listen to your body and take the time to rest. Don't go and punish yourself for missing that run because you took the time to listen to your body and rest. Trusting yourself, not moving too far into a movement, and on the flip side of that, you also have to know when to challenge yourself a little bit, right? So physical movement, building self-trust by actually listening and following through with certain things, alongside physical movement practice and learning to build trust with yourself. Another really good tool is building a practice of mindfulness. And there's different ways that you can practice mindfulness. In your physical movement practice, mindfulness is one of the most important pieces of learning to build your intuition through these pathways, right? You need to be able to trust yourself. You need to be able to practice mindfully because not paying attention is what's going to cause injury, and mindfulness can be practiced in a lot more ways than just sitting down, closing your eyes, and trying to meditate. Mindfulness can be practiced through doing the dishes. You can start doing the dishes and say, hey, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes doing the dishes, not listening to music and not thinking of anything other than what I am doing right here, right now, in this moment. And building a mindfulness practice, a practice where you are fully present, through the entire interaction, is really going to grow your intuition profoundly because you are allowing yourself, first off, you're allowing your brain time to be quiet, your thinking brain. You're not sitting there bombarding yourself with 1,000 thoughts and 1,000 different trains of all the rest of it. You're thinking about just one thing in this moment right now. That allows you to quiet the brain. And in the moments when we are quiet is when we can hear these intuitive messages the best, when we can receive them the easiest, because we're not being distracted by the sounds of life and the internal thoughts of ourself. And so finding time for mindfulness, meditation, movement, any of those skills, any of those tools are going to be really, really good for learning to build your intuition. Now, personally, one of my favorite ways, and one of the ways that I have grown my intuition over the course of my tarot practice, is practicing tarot. And that seems kind of counterintuitive, right? When you start tarot, you think that you have to have good intuition to be able to read the cards. And that's just not true. It comes with practice. Talent is pursued interest. And so when you see the people that are really, really good at doing something, you see people that are really talented tarot readers with their intuition. You see people who are, as we said earlier in yoga class, you see the yogis who are able to do these really, really advanced poses. And it's because they took their interest and they pursued it. They practiced, they put in the work. And so growing your intuition, this is something that is going to happen over time. It's not going to happen overnight. Just like the gym, this is a muscle of yourself, of your brain, and your spiritual practice that is going to need constant exercise, constant growth over time in order to get to this point that you maybe have for yourself, or this goal to be able to do this. So starting a tarot practice for yourself, even if you don't feel like you're intuitive yet, is going to grow your intuition. Now, when you are a beginner tarot reader, where do you start? If you're learning how to grow your intuition, where do you start? Your best tool is really just observation. Let's talk about how you do this, right? So, for example, if you're a beginner tarot reader and you're learning to build your intuition, and you pull something like this here, the King of Swords, right? Start with observation. Take a look at the card and just write down all of what you see on the card here. Write down every little detail that you notice with your eyes. Look at the card, look at the colors, look at the people, write down how many people are on it, write down anything that seems interesting to you. And then you can look up the symbolism or significance of that. And yes, you can still grow your intuition even if you are using a guidebook during your tarot readings, okay? I don't want to hear anybody hating on anybody for using these guidebooks that come with your tarot decks, okay? They are there for a reason and it's there to help you. So, how do we use a guide? How do we use a guidebook when we read tarot decks, right? Well, when you pull a card, you're going to find that card in the guide deck. So, let's pull my Mystic Mondays here. We have the Queen of Cups in reverse. So let's turn the guidebook page to the Queen of Cups in reverse. Let me find it. Here we go. Okay. So this guidebook has a little page that has the Queen of Cups reverse meaning on it, and it has things like keywords, and it has a whole paragraph here about what this card means. And from the meaning of the card, you then take it and you say, well, how does this apply in my life? How does this apply to my question? Maybe you asked a question and this card came out as your answer, and you need to figure out for yourself how this meaning applies to your situation. And by doing that over time, you're eventually going to build up your intuition to the point where you can pull this card and you can immediately know who this card signifies, what the meaning of the card is, and not even just the textbook meaning, right? Because over time, your intuition is going to tell you different things about that. You're going to learn about that card, who that card represents. And it can be different every time. You know, sometimes that card can represent one person, and other times it represents you. And really, over time, this practice, this doing it over and over again, is really what is going to grow your intuition. So, don't be afraid of practice. Don't be afraid to use a guidebook. Start early and do it consistently. And over time, you will grow your intuition. So, real quick, just to recap, let's talk about the things that we can do to grow our intuition. We have mindfulness, we have physical movement, building self-trust, and finally, tarot. And now, just because I used tarot as an example does not mean that you have to use tarot. If you are interested in learning about runes or some other sort of divination method, that is totally fine too, because that is all of these divination practices are going to be tools to help you grow your intuition. And you don't have to know it all right away, but the consistent practice is really what is the most important tool here. So I hope that you all learned something today. I hope that this video was able to help you, encourage you on your journey of growing your intuition, and I hope that I was able to help provide some valuable insight to you about different things that you can do to grow your intuition. So thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.